Hello and welcome to Mirketa's webinar on Master Data Management. I'll be your host today. My name is Rajiv Kumar. I'm going to go through a formal introduction in a little bit. We plan to do a 60 minutes of webinar today. A recording copy of this webinar will be available to you after the webinar. We'll send you an email with the link. If you have any questions and if you want to participate in the discussion, keep sending your question through the chat window on your webinar tool. Without further delay, I'll get started with the webinar. Today's agenda is going to be, we'll talk about Mirketa a little bit so you know who we are. We'll talk about the speakers. With me, I have my colleague Pranshu, who will be co-hosting the webinar. So he's going to talk about himself. I'll give you an introduction about me. Then we're going to move into understanding MDM. So what is Master Data Management? So that's going to be a couple of slides that we want to spend time on before getting into the details of how to do it. We want to talk about what it is. Then we're going to get into the details of why Master Data Management makes sense. And the third topic, and that's is going to be about how do you actually go about it. So you like what you hear, then where do you start? We'll show you some architectural detail behind what are the different options, what tools you can use, and we'll show you implementation model from one of our clients, how it looks once you have done it. Towards the end, we're going to talk about data governance, especially around managing your duplicate data in Salesforce. So that is pretty much the agenda. So we hope to cover this in about 45 minutes, and we have kept enough time for you guys to have any questions. So we're going to entertain those questions towards the end. Let's go for the first slide about us. So Mirketa is a silver consulting partner. We are based out of San Ramon, California. We have a offshore development center in Noida, India. So we are pure play Salesforce consulting organization. We do provide services in Salesforce, anything to do with Salesforce, different clouds, data and business intelligence solutions. We do build AI-based chatbots for our clients. We do work with our clients in process engineering, especially around customer service, sales, marketing, and HR areas. And we have done quite a bit of work, and we continue to do work on custom app development and system integrations. We have done work on mobile, Force.com, .NET, Java. So we can do any extension that you have to build around Salesforce. So we have done that for our clients. Getting a bit deeper into our portfolio of services that we provide, anything from strategy and architecture to delivery management, we do it all. Under strategy and architecture, our services include process engineering for sales, service, HR processes, any strategy such as how do you actually go about MDM and rolling out MDM blueprint, that would fall under a strategy engagement from our point of view. So strategy and governance, anything around technology selections. For example, if you want to go with MDM, not sure what tool makes sense to us, there's going to be another strategic engagement that we can take on with you. And then solution architecture, how does the overall blueprint of your solution going to look like? So that's part of our strategy and architecture piece of the work we do. Second set of services we have is Salesforce implementation and integration. Anything to do with the Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, Marketing Cloud, all other clouds the Salesforce has. Either we have done work already with the clients or we're doing some work with the clients. So we have quite a bit of breadth in terms of rolling out Salesforce different cloud solutions. We've also done some work on Heroku, Dell Boomi, MuleSoft, and Informatica as the iPaaS platform. So we do that as part of our implementation and integration services. Next set of services are about data solutions. That's where our MDM solutions will fall under. Data solution, anything around data architecture, and then using that for analytics, forecasting, whether it's related to sales, marketing, social. So we actually build that solutions for you. Under application development, I've talked about that earlier. We do full stack for Force.com development. We do mobile development, Java, PHP, Python apps. So we have in-house capabilities to build those. And lastly, under delivery management, we got DevOps related services and the project management services that we offer to our clients. So that's about Mirketa and what we do. Now I'm going to get into who we are. your host today. So again, my name is Rajiv Kumar. I'm the CEO and the Chief Product Officer at Mirketa. I've been in the industry for over 20 years. I've been working on Salesforce solution architecture, implementation, anything to do with Salesforce for about 12 years now. And I'll be leading the session today. With me, I have Pranshu, my colleague. I'll let him introduce himself.
Thank you, Rajiv. Hello, everyone. I'm the Senior Product Manager at Mirketa. I'm managing multiple product teams here. I have hands-on experience with enterprise business applications, and I work with multiple clients across domains. I welcome you all in our webinar today. Hope to have a good time here. Over to you, Rajiv. Thank you.
Thank you, Pranshu. Okay, so let's start with what is master data management. So we're going to go through some basic definitions because that's where, you would find, if you Google, you're going to find a lot of this information available online. We have put in some information based on our experience and learning. So master data management is it's a collection of tools, people, processes, and we can, for this definition purposes, we're going to call it all together as process. It's the master data management is a process used to identify and manage master data to ensure that data used across different systems and group is accurate and is referred consistently across the different systems and teams that are using the data. Now, this essentially requires you to have not only a technology solution, but it's going to be a solution that does require you to build your business architecture, a system solution behind the scene, and a process that's going to keep this data fresh, free of duplicates, having some governance around the data, everything put together. The practice is called master data management. The next question that comes to us after that is, what is master data? So master data is basically, for every business that you have certain key business objects or business entities that are required to execute on different processes, whether it's selling, buying, customer service, case management, and things like that. Now, those key entities, the certain attributes those entities are used across different processes. When we talk about master data is the attributes, the set of attributes for key business entities required to conduct business operations. Example of such entities would be customers, prospects, partners. You can think of locations. You can think of any other business object that you are using across different systems to run your business. What master data is not is your emails, which is unstructured data, or anything that you're doing on social media. You have a lot of transactional data. That is not master data. The transactional data would be if you're selling, if somebody buys an order, puts an order, that's a transaction data. That doesn't qualify to be in the same realm of master data. Anything around metadata is not a master data. So if you have a key order and the order has certain attributes, they don't necessarily become master data. Hierarchical data is also not master data. Hierarchical data not necessarily is a master data. Hierarchical data would be when you are looking at the different objects, how they get connected with each other. So not that hierarchical data is not master data always, but mostly it's not. So we'll talk about this in a little bit. I know it's kind of a confusing statement that I just made because when you do build master data, you do track the hierarchy of these different key objects. So from that sense, hierarchical data sometimes would be part of it. But in general, it's not. How do you go about master data? The last point is important. If you are trying to roll out master data management practice, where do you actually start? So you essentially, it's not a small effort. It's not an effort that can be done in silo. It does require understanding your end-to-end business, understanding your business entities, what attributes these entities have, how they connect with each other, and what process are using those entities. So that, for me, all of that put together, let's say we call it business architecture. So you need that. Capturing business objects, their attributes, definition, contextual information. That's how you get started. If you were to say, what the scope of MDM is going to be, it's a pretty huge effort starting from the top. Let's look at some examples of what master data in Salesforce would be. And this is, again, the webinar is going to be leaning towards master data management from the Salesforce point of view. So it makes sense for us to just talk about a couple of examples here. So if you are using Salesforce and you have products in Salesforce, you would have product as master data. Whether it stays in Salesforce as the master data or not, that's a different story, but product would be a master data. Customers, or as we call accounts in Salesforce, is master data. Any information about your partner, whether supplier or some other third-party partners, they're going to be part of master data. If you're working on different locations, that's part of master data. And contacts, employees, they would become a part of master data. And now again, when I say would, essentially when you go through what identifying master data, you have certain criteria that you're going to look at and see whether each one of those qualify to be master data. But generally speaking, this would be a good list to start with. Now, looking at why should we do MDM, and essentially, you have multiple different systems that are working. You've been able to do transactions. What is the need? Why should we go spend time and money in coming up with the MDM strategy, having an MDM solution? That starts with, if I flip the slide and say, like, what happens if you don't have MDM? That's another way of looking at it. So having MDM ensures that you can have consistent information across different channels. Now, if I'm calling customer in certain ways on web channel, and if I have a mobile app that's using the same entity called customers, you want both of them to share consistent information about the customer. You want them to be called, attributes to be called the same. So when a customer is looking at it, they're getting a unified view. So consistency across not just channels in terms of the systems, but also different departments. It is important when people are saying that, oh, we're going to deal with vendors, there's a definition that goes along with that, and everybody understands what it is. The second would be a unified view of your master. Now, unified view would be your master data may have attributes that are distributed across different systems sometimes. I can have customers. Some of the customer information is kept in my core systems. Some could be lying in another business application that deals with customer. If I were to make a conscious effort of collecting the common information that I would call master data for my customer, I would have to extract it out and create a view which gets the data points from different systems that you have. So having a common unified view, so it does aggregate data attributes from different systems and come up with the master data. Another advantage of doing a master data is integration, ease of integration. So now you could connect, now everything is connected with your CRM system, with your ERP system. Now, not having master data, it takes you to the starting point when you are having an object reference, which is common across different processes. You need to know what is the source of truth. Which data should I take? Where should I take my data from? And if I do change my data, which system should I update? Now, that is where a lot of effort when you go into integration as a partner, when we go to a client doing integration work, a lot of the time that we spend in doing data architecture is figuring out which is the source and where should we actually get the data from if we have to make a reference. And that is basically what we mean, easier integration. Of course, you're going to have the same technical challenges in terms of building the integration connections, but identifying data is much easier when you have an MDM view clearly defined, master view clearly defined. Next advantage is understanding a customer. Now, you could say understanding your employees, you can say understanding a vendor. We call that customer because it has more impact on your business. Understanding a customer from different systems, how it's being seen. And if you did create a unified view of your customer, you know what your customer looks like, what kind of hierarchy customer have, what people are we dealing with. So all of that gets easier when you have a well-defined master data schema. A lot of the information when you're dealing with CRM, Salesforce in particular, you have all this information available in Salesforce. The challenge is if you have downstream systems that are using and updating some information about your customer without having a master data schema, you probably will have incomplete information in Salesforce, incomplete or inconsistent information, outdated information in Salesforce or the other system. So understanding customer is much easier, more comprehensive view. And then you have governance and data. So data governance is one of the biggest challenge as an application owner you would feel if you have any application, regardless of the business rules that you apply, unless there's a well-defined governance model on your application, you're going to have data that's outdated, data that duplicate, data that gets managed by different people that are not having the right privileges to manage. So all kind of issues would come in. When you go with the master data architecture and design, one of the challenges that you solve for is building the schema and getting the data first time is all good. How do you maintain it going forward? And that's where better governance comes in. So there's a lot that goes into doing governance. That itself is a consulting engagement sometimes we end up doing about, how do you actually maintain your data? We look across different systems. We talk about, what the master data structure is going to look like and how should we manage it going forward. And lastly, accountability of your data. And now this, you can say, it's also part of governance. It is in some ways. We call it out because, often when you're dealing with multiple sources of data, it's very easy in a larger organization, especially, to forget who is accountable for the dirty data, or who's accountable to keep the data clean and available to different systems. If I'm going to be using core data, master data, am I Rajiv Kumar, who owns master data system? And if it's a distributed master data schema, then what part of data is managed by who? Having a clear accountability is, defining that is part of MDM solution. So that essentially, why people do it. And believe me, the pain of not having MDM comes into the play when you're rolling out a cross-enterprise initiative where you actually have been touching different processes, and you need to have consistent set of data that you use and provide to the downstream systems. All right. So now we know what master data management is, what master data means, what do we mean by master data, and then why should we do master data management. Now, if you're convinced with why, the next step is, I like what I'm hearing, how do I actually go about it? So it is essentially a large effort, primarily a lot of analytical effort that goes up in the beginning, and we have tried to capture some of the steps that you would do in terms of you were running it as a program. How do you actually get started? What you need to do, and then you define who needs to do. It's a different story, but what you need to do is what we're going to cover here. The number one thing that you have to do is figure out what is my master data. And now for doing that, is one item is going to require you to do your business process modeling or business architecture. What are the key entities, how they get used across different processes. That's how, and whether you want to, how much of that entity attributes you want to store at one centralized place or distributed place. That's a different point altogether. But what do we store as master data? So that's number one. That can take time. Part of that number one is going to be, if we have identified master data, then who's going to be producing? That means who is actually updating this master data, creating master data, and who's going to be consuming that. So we know both sides of the equation. What are the source systems? What's going to be the consumer systems? So you need to know both. And why do we need both? It's basically, you're going to have to build solution, get alignment, not just technical alignment, but process alignment and accountability alignment, governance alignment with the people who are going to be as part of the source system. What data they need to send it to the central repository, and what data, if they do update, how to inform master data platform. Okay. Once you got that, you identify the owner who's going to be owning the master data. Once you get the ownership defined, then you define stewardship, which is Rajiv owns the data. How do we actually, when we have the data there, who's going to be maintaining it? How do we get to maintain? How would we maintain it? That's another thing that you have to identify. Identify the data governance council implementation. So figuring out, we got a good sense of what our master data looks like. We got a good sense of who's going to be consuming it. Now, it's never going to be that easy. If you have multiple departments and multiple systems involved, how do we actually align these different system owners and different departments to comply with the master data requirement? And that's where the governance council concept comes into the picture. So you got to have some form of governance council that you need to roll out, identify the right members, identify how they're going to meet, identify what their objectives going to be, why they should exist, what's expected out of them in the context of data management. And then you get into the details of master data model development, which is, now I know what systems, what data, who's going to consuming it, who owns that, how are we going to maintain it, what our governance model is going to look like, and then you can do the data schema, the data modeling. Now you could start this effort in parallel. You don't have to wait to establish the council. You don't have to wait to establish some of the other items like stewardship. You could start the work in parallel. Once you get the model developed, then you're gonna do, I got the model, I got the storage space. Now how do we actually create the data and how do we test it? So that's going to be more of an execution level. Then you have infrastructure, which is, we need to have maybe multiple servers, maybe multiple instances of the same data, so people, different geographies have access to the data with less latency, for example. You do look at the tools that you're going to use for maintaining and master data, and then the maintenance process. So that's essentially the key attributes, or the key tasks that you have to worry about when you go into master data implementation. There's a lot more that goes into when you actually run it as a program. It does become an enterprise-wide effort. It's not an effort that can be done at the local department level, although you could do a mini version of master data at the department level as well if your department is having challenges with maintaining the master data. Now, once you've figured out, how the master data management is going to happen, then you start thinking about all what we have. We understand the master data, we understand the need. Everything is conceptually fleshed out. How would it look conceptually when you look at the architecture? There are 3 different options, and some options are easier to do than other options. And so I'll tell you as I go through those options. So the number one, conceptually, is what we call registry architecture. So essentially what you do in this, you got the master data platform, and you have, for the purposes of this discussion, let's say you have applications that are going to be contributing towards the master data. We're going to call them source. And we call other side of the application, we call consumer applications. Now, source and consumer could be one and the same application as well. So keep that in mind in this slide and the following slides. So when you're looking at registry-based architecture, this essentially is a model where you have source systems that are updating master data. Now, master data platform keeps certain key attributes, not all attributes, certain key attributes of the master data entities. So when a source system is updating or sending master data, it looks at its own business rules and sees, do I have something that already exists, or does it make sense what I'm getting from source system? And does it, so to speak, the data integrity or validation on its own? And based on that, it stores the data or it updates the data, cleanses the data, whatever is required within the system, and essentially keeps a clean copy of that for downstream systems, the consumer systems, to use it. Now, once the data is updated in master data, it's not sent back to the source system. So source system will have their copy of whatever they had. So it's not a two-way communication here. Another thing that I would just highlight here again is only few elements of data are stored. So in case you wanted to get the complete picture of the master data or the entities, master entities, then you have to combine the information from master and the source, different source systems. And that typically is done using some sort of offline process or some some batch process, you could do that. The second option, although the diagram here is going to look the same, we'll call it a consolidation model. Now, the difference here is that you do store a little bit more information in master data, unlike in the first option. Here, master data pretty much can be used to provide most of the information that's required for master entities. When a source system is sending data to master data after updating its own record, it sends back the updated record to the source system. Now, there is a latency in terms of the sync up, because master data will make its own changes. It may have some offline process that it uses to update source system. Now, during that duration, that time period, master data in the master platform, could be different than what you see in source data. So, although in theory, you would have the same copy, in practice, there's going to be some latency by the time you're going to have the same copy in master and source systems. Now, since you have a lot of attributes stored in master data here, you could use this system to create different reports. So because you got, and straight from master data platform, you can create reports. You don't have to do views from different source applications to come up with the entities, details for master entities. Lastly, we're going to call it a hybrid model. So hybrid model, again, the key difference here is going to be almost all data attributes are kept in master data. So master data is essentially can be used, to get any information that you need about the master entities. So you could go, fetch the data from there. Source systems in master data platform, they are in sync. It's a real-time sync. So if I'm changing anything in master, it changes in source. Source is, a master data can make a call to source system to make the changes to source system, or vice versa. Information needed to identify the duplication is stored in the master data repository itself. So, and that would be the case in different models as well, where you do keep, whatever your key data duplicate rules are, or the fields that are used to identify those. You want to store that in master data. That's how you're going to run your, the duplicate checks. So essentially, 3 different models. Doing the third model, the third option is the most expensive, and it takes time. Most expensive in the sense technical implementation. In terms of the process cost and the cost of figuring out the solution is still the same. There's not much that changes, analysis-wise. What is the master data and how do you maintain it? All that problem remains, the solution for those problems remains the same way as you're going to have for this. In terms of building a real-time sync, obviously, you have to worry about the transactional cost. You have to worry about, how many calls you're going to make, and, the impact and performance and things like that. So that makes it a bit more involved and expensive. Now let's look at, from Salesforce point of view, what would an implementation for MDM going to look like? So here, what we have, it's Salesforce as the CRM, and this essentially we have taken out from one of the implementations that we have done for a client. So Salesforce is CRM. You got the data warehouse system. You got the transactional portal. It's a mobile application, a web application, and it can have multiple different applications. Backend. You have those transactions portals, and then you have ERP system, JD Edwards in this case. The client actually had multiple ERP systems. We're just showing one, but you can have, you can imagine, like we have a transactional portal, you can have multiple ERP portal, geography specific. They may share the same customer, but they have different attributes for different countries or different locations. So that's what makes this whole problem very interesting. The way we went about this, obviously, went through the analysis on, what are the key set of data, master data, that are required to be stored. and where we're going to store it, and how we're going to maintain it, who's going to be the source of truth. In this case, we realized that the source of truth, essentially, although Salesforce was starting managing the sales process, since we had certain backend systems that already had customer data in it for most customers, we had to have that as a starting point for the source. And then we sync that up with Salesforce in the real time and in between, I forgot to mention, when you had this hub created, you need a bus, you need an integration bus. You can now you have iPaaS platform, so online SaaS platforms that you could use. You can use Delboom, you can replace it with MuleSoft, you can replace it with Informatica. Those are the popular ones. Essentially, once you identify what the data is, what data, what's going to be the source for master data, you take a copy of the source and you update those in your master data platform. In this case, we use Amazon Web Services to host the data. A copy of my master data is hosted there. Anytime any system is updating that master copy, whether it's the ERP system or it's a transaction portal or it's a data warehouse. Actually, data warehouse didn't really change, but CRM, ERP system, and transaction portal, it would go through the same iPaaS where we're going to validate, which system needs to be, downstream system needs to be updated. If all the attributes are not stored in MDM, we pass on all the attributes to different systems, and we pass on the required attributes to MDM platform, which updates the record on its own. So essentially, in terms of the timeline, the whole effort probably took about 4 to 5 months to implement, not counting a lot of the analysis work that we had to do upfront. So once we started working on it, just executing on integrating different systems and having a host system on Amazon was about 5 months, 6 months work for us. So that's essentially how it would look if we were to go with an MDM solution. Now let's go through a few points on, and apologies for having a typo right here. I'll fix it as we go. So MDM, when you're rolling out Salesforce CRM, how does it impact the MDM strategy? And that's the question that we need to ask, because essentially, in this case, we're taking Salesforce, but any system, CRM system that you're going to roll out is going to go through the same, it's going to have the same impact. You have to go through the same questions as an organization. I'm rolling out this core system. How would that impact my master data management strategy or solution that I have already in place? So number one, when you are rolling out Salesforce or any CRM for that matter, it is most of the time is the place where customer data is originating. In many cases, you can have locations, product data as well, but definitely customer and any entities associated with customer are coming from Salesforce. So obviously, you need to figure out now if that's going to be my source, how would that come to me, to my master data platform? So you need to worry about it. How many, if you already have MDM solution in place, then you have to see how that impacts, because Salesforce feels maybe different than what you've been storing. So you have to look at from that perspective. Another one is you may have multiple CRMs because you had, different, sometimes within a company, because of acquisition reasons or because of even, different departments, the way they rolled out their CRM solutions, especially in a larger organizations, you may have multiple CRMs. Now, multiple CRMs may have multiple data models that they've used. And when you're rolling out Salesforce, you're adding another CRM, if not multiple, then at least the first one. And it is likely to have the key entity data like customer store across different systems. So you need to worry about, if I'm going to use customers, which other system is using customers and how they're stored. And you obviously have to worry about, how you're going to keep them in sync. Another point, as you're going to roll out a Salesforce system, your definitions may not be the same as other systems. So the whole exercise about data dictionary and having a data architecture becomes important, because now you have to go through these entities and say, like, what do we want to call them? What's the contextual information? What's the actual definition we want to use for these entities? And what are the key attributes? So it's a good time, if you're thinking about MDM, if you already have an MDM, it's a good time to do refreshing of your data dictionary or data architecture. Next one, how it impacts the lack of data governance. So essentially, when you're rolling out Salesforce, if you don't have data governance around it, around what the source is, what the golden record is going to be, how you're going to duplicate management, what's the standards around, maintaining data or entering certain data, hierarchies that you have for data, which is about how data is connected, they may not have any governance. So rolling out Salesforce takes you in that direction. Start thinking about data governance right from the day one. There could be multiple hierarchical relationships in the data, and sometimes what ends up happening is, although hierarchy is clear, Salesforce may not support it, or there's no easy way to support it in Salesforce. So you got to figure out, how do we actually provide this view or information to Salesforce users, internal users, if the hierarchy that you have cannot be replicated in Salesforce. MDM provides a common and complete source of MD master data across different systems. So obviously, that's the main goal. And then if you have the master data platform, most consumer systems would make a call to master data platform to get the data. So your calls, inbound calls, inquiries for Salesforce is going to be reduced. And as you know, having an API, inbound API call in Salesforce, you need to be careful about how many calls you want to make. Depending on the license and the agreement that you have, you may have some call limits. So essentially, it's a good thing if you go with MDM, you isolate Salesforce from all the inbound inquiries for the data that's stored in Salesforce. So with that, I'm going to be done with my part of the webinar. I'm going to hand it over to Pranshu, who's going to get into the data governance, and in particular, specifically around data duplicates in Salesforce context. So that is basically the next a few slides that we want to cover, data governance, data duplications for Salesforce. And Pranshu, handing over to you. Take it on from here, sir.
Thank you, Rajiv. That was informative. So, we talked about MDM in detail, and all of this is good. But one main point, which every organization, I think, has and deals with on a day-to-day basis, is the existence of duplicates in the system. Talking about specifically in terms of Salesforce, Salesforce being an open system that collects data from various sources, is bound to encounter several duplicate data records. The most common routes through which duplicate data creeps in, there can be multiple reasons why the duplicate data creeps in. So one can be, we were just talking about if you are implementing a new CRM in your organization, or you are migrate and let's say then you have to migrate some data from your old system to your new system. So while migrating that data, some duplicates might creep in. Then data coming from integrations and third-party connectors, of course, can lead to data duplication. One of the major challenges that I think for the data duplicity is loading bulk data from data loaders. So we'll have to ensure, generally without cleaning up old data and without comparing the new data and the data that is existing in the new system. That is where the problem occurs, and duplicate data comes into the system. Then there are errors in manual data entry, and this is a big one. Saving half-filled records so this is a practice in sales organizations. Sales reps do create data records, and they are, and let's say if they are partially filled and they are saved, and while recording the data again, the old data record is not pulled up, and again the old one is not pulled up, and then you create a new record, and that's where the data duplicity issue occurs there. Then we have the same information captured at multiple sources. Again, multiple lead sources capturing the same data. And lastly, no application or tool in the system to restrict duplicates from entering the system. So these are some of the areas from where duplicate data creeps in. And let's see quickly how it impacts the business. So duplicate data, it undermines the ability of an organization to provide an excellent customer experience. So the customer experience gets a hit, the brand image itself gets a hit because the customer experience is not good. It increases the cost of marketing campaigns due to duplicate data, because you'll have to now, you are incurring extra cost for the same data that is existing in your system. Then overall, the productivity of an organization is affected due to the reduced operational efficiency, because you are working on the same data again and again, which doesn't make sense. Ultimately, bad data leads to ill-informed decision, because the data that is in your system is, you are going to pull up reports based on that data, right? And so because that data is duplicate, it's of bad quality, so that is going to lead to ill-informed business decisions. And there is actually a report from IBM which says that poor data quality costs the US economy at around $3.1 trillion annually. I mean, clearly this is a very big problem which every organization is trying to cope up with. So these are, so we saw that how the duplicate data creeps in and how it impacts the business. Let's understand some steps to mitigate the risk of having poor data quality in the first place. Rajiv, if we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So I would start by saying, think of all the ways the customer data enters your CRM system. Be it manual customer data entry by sales rep, be it bulk customer data upload, be it automated lead sources like web to lead, etc. And you ensure that you have them all covered to avoid duplicates entering into a CRM system. So when you do that, monitor the data that your CRM system is getting from multiple sources to keep an eye if anything goes wrong is happening around your data. So generally companies don't realize this until they have loads of dirty data existing in the CRM system, and then they try to recuperate from the damage that is already being done. So we can work on that beforehand, so as to mitigate that risk. Keeping a mandatory field on each object, so it will help you. So I'll tell you how it helps you. So keep a mandatory field on every object that is relevant to your business operation. Let's say a phone number or an email address. For standard fields, enable some duplicate rules and matching rules specifically to Salesforce. So Salesforce has duplicate rules and matching rules which you can enable so that when you try to enter duplicate data, it won't allow you. For the custom fields, you can, so while creating custom fields, the option of do not allow duplicates in Salesforce. So that would ensure that while entering duplicate data on that customer, on that custom field, it won't accept duplicity and the record won't be saved. You'll get an error. If your mandatory field is a picklist field, so we were just talking about keeping a mandatory field on every object, right? So if your mandatory field is a picklist field, ensure that you enable restricted picklist for that field, as Salesforce allows values coming in from external system other than picklist field also. So if you just hit that enable restricted picklist, it won't allow other values as well. Then you ensure that you have clean data while uploading data in bulk. While uploading data through data loaders, you clean up the data initially. If you need to cross check it with existing data in the system, do that, clean it up, and then upload the data. Then define all your lead sources clearly and distinctly. This can avoid a lot of confusion when lead starts to pour in from multiple systems. So there can be n number of places that the leads are coming in. There can be n number of distinct lead sources. So if you define all of them clearly, you'll have a report to pull up at the end of the day to cross check which data is coming from where, and you can, if needed, you can clean it up. Then make sure your sales reps fill the necessary customer details in the form and instruct them not to have a half-filled form. So this we were talking about this in the previous slide. This is some so this is a process issue. The sales rep teams can be trained on this part to be instructed to not to fill save half-filled forms. Then the cloning of any record should be restricted, because this also leads to data deduplication. This could lead to data deduplication. Then using standard Salesforce reports for tracking duplicates entering your system are essential to your business. So you can pull up Salesforce record for tracking the duplicates. With large data volumes of data nowadays and various data connection sources, duplicate data is bound to enter your system. And we recommend some of the tools that we see on Salesforce App Exchange for data deduplication. And these applications are, Rajiv, if the next slide, please. Thank you. So these are some of the top Dedupe apps on Salesforce. Mirketa, as an expert in data management problems, we have developed our own duplicate management solution, which is Advitya. It's on App Exchange. Talking about Dedupe's apps in general on App Exchange, we see that most of the apps are taking the data out of Salesforce platform, and they are cleaning it up and then inserting the data back into the system. We try to do something differently here. We are keeping the data on the Salesforce platform itself, and we are processing the data on the organization itself. So that is one point that we say that it's 100% secure. So your data is with you, and there is no issue of data breach anyway. So talking about Advitya, Advitya dedupes your data in a simple yet powerful wizard-based 5 steps, along with notification alerts, intuitive dashboard. It is a completely native Salesforce application, as I just said, which ensures your data security. So I'll quickly go through the 5 steps that I am just saying. So the first step would be selecting your object for the data deduplication, and these objects can be standard or custom. Then you create filter based on your preference as to what fields on what field you want to dedupe the job. The next step would be selecting the master record for the job. So selecting the master record would mean out of the bunch of duplicates, you select one master record in which you want to merge all the others. In Advitya, the master record that we have, master record selection, it can be manual or automatic based on certain queries. Then the next step, the fourth step, is the actual search process of the duplicates. It will up all the information that you have in your org, and it searches all the duplicates that you have. Then the fifth step actually merges the duplicates. You can run that query and it merges the duplicates. So these in this 5-step process, you get end-to-end options of creating filters, then setting the master records, searching duplicates. Then the query that you just made, it can be saved to us to use further on your dashboard, on your uh, as setting a weekly or a monthly job, which can run automatically. So yes, these are some of the cool features that Advitya has. I think that is it from my side, Rajiv.
Thank you, Pranchu. So with that, we have about 9 minutes, guys, for Q&A. So if you have any questions, you could text chat, put that into the chat box, and Pranchu will get it. And Pranchu, once you have those questions, you can read it to me or to the team here. We would give us a couple of minutes to wait for the questions if you already don't have some.
Rajiv, I already see a question here which says, what do you recommend as a tool for iPass? Yeah. What do you recommend as a tool as an iPass?
Got it. So that's going to be your the integration bus. So platform as a service, what is the integration bus that we recommend? So when I was going through the implementation slide earlier today, and I talked about 3 different iPaaS that we have worked and we liked. Dell Boomi is one of those. MuleSoft from Salesforce. That was an acquisition Salesforce did, I think, a couple of years ago. And then you have Informatica. Informatica as a tool started, so Informatica has been around for a long time. Obviously, they already are in most of the companies. So if you have Informatica, you could talk to them and have a demo for their iPaaS. If you don't, then Boomi and MuleSoft, even those two, what the demo. And then depending upon your needs, the budget, probably you want to make a decision out of these 3. There are some newer, cheaper solutions in the market that are targeting domain-specific integration platform. So you may look into those. So that's kind of it. So we do endorse 3, as I said, Boomi, MuleSoft, and Informatica.
Thank you, Rajiv. I see another question here which says, out of the 2 models that you discussed for master data management, the architecture models, which is the recommended model?
Right. Recommended model would be the 3rd one, where you do have real-time sync. Master data has all the attributes that's required. You could do your queries from there. You can do the reports from most of the reporting from there. Downstream system can use that directly from master data platform. But that's the most expensive one too. So if you have a budget constraint, at least you avoid the duplicates. I would say go with architecture option 1. You can always build the incremental pieces. So architecture option 1 is going to be more, you should have at least a centralized place where you have the unique set of data and all the source systems are tagged with the master data key. So you're avoiding the duplicates going forward. So recommendation would be number 3. I would say it is a decision that business and technology team come together to make. Cost is an input to it. So depending upon the need, how rigid you want it to be, you can go with 3 or maybe 2 if you can live with latency in syncing up the data.
Okay. Let's wait for. Okay, I see a question here. It says, "What is the additional cost in architecturing the solution?"
Got it. So if you, and this is again, different experts will have their own opinion. My opinion is based on the experience that we have with rolling out Salesforce. So if you are rolling out Salesforce, thinking about MDM is a byproduct of the rollout. That's how it should be done. If you think it after the fact, then the cost is going to be double now because you've gone through the implementation, didn't think about MDM strategy. Now you have to redo it, and it's going to impact the implementation itself for Salesforce. So when you talk about incremental cost, minus the, forget about the implementation piece of MDM platform. If you were just to come with the model and governance structure, that would probably increase your analysis time by, and I'm just throwing a number in our experience. If you have the right stakeholders available, you're adding another 20% of the analysis, 25% of the project analysis cost. Implementation would be a different ballgame altogether. So if you're going with if you're going with the iPaaS platform, definitely if you have a lot of integration, you're going to have that to begin with. So there's no additional cost there. It's the data storage cost. And if you have a large set of data that you're going to store, regardless, outside Salesforce, then there's no additional storage cost or platform cost there either. So it's like building some additional integration point would be the cost. And for us, each integration point, and again, these are the benchmark we use, maybe each point would be about 2 weeks worth of development effort. So, by the time you roll it out. So that's how you can, extrapolate, what the effort is going to be. My recommendation is if you're thinking about MDM, go along with, if you have a new system, CRM system, ERP system, go along with even CPQ for that matter, if you're going with that, because it does require you to look into a lot of the core processes. Look into data management strategy as part of the project analysis.
Okay, thank you, Rajiv. I can see a question regarding Advitya, and it says, can Advitya be used for deduplicating only transactional data or also the master data? So let me take this up, Rajiv. So yes, as we said that Advitya can be used for deduplication on custom as well as the standard objects. So yes, it can be used for master data as well. The leads, the accounts, contact, opportunity, all those, we are handling all those deduplication of those objects as well in Advitya.
Right. And if I can add a little bit to that, if you are
Sure.
storing, if you're going with a distributed master data structure where Salesforce does have some attributes of master data stored in Salesforce alone, in that case, definitely Advitya makes sense. But if we have master data stored completely, all the attributes are stored completely outside Salesforce, then Advitya won't be a choice, because now you have, you need to work on data dedupe outside Salesforce. So within Salesforce, you could do it.
Yeah,
I mean, that's what I think. You can correct me on that.
No, definitely.
Awesome. I think we are coming to the end of our time. If you don't have any questions, I can summarize, what's going to happen next. We will, post this webinar online. So you guys will have access to the recording from this webinar. We will send a link to all the attendees. And if you guys have any questions or if you have any follow-up discussion you want to do with us, we can schedule a one-on-one call to go over what we covered today. I do appreciate everybody's time today. Thank you for joining. Good luck if you're going with the MDM work. If you have any questions, feel free to send us a note. Thank you.
Thank you very much.